Artificial intelligence and the rule of law. This is session 9. This is first class of the same three classes which we'll have on this. Let us do a recap of the previous session. Key points were discussed in the previous classes about algorithms and algorithm decision making. We also discussed a case study where algorithm-based decision was challenged, and then we highlighted issues in algorithm decision making and its use and why some uses are controversial. In this class, we will start with the overview of AI and rule of law. Rule of law we have already discussed in the previous classes, where we emphasized upon the importance of rule of law in a democratic society and its constitutional basis. So in these three sessions, we will look in depth how AI will and can impact rule of law, and then how people who are safeguarding or who want to support rule of law, or who are considering that rule of law should be the cardinal principle to govern the society as well as the legal institutions, are responding to that. So we need to start with some fundamental ideas as to why so much of debate is happening on the role of AI in the rule of law. Basically, artificial intelligence and ML technologies are used in various phases of legal process. We have seen many cases and many instances and given a lot of examples of AI is being used in different legal processes, including algorithmic decision making process, as well as the increasing role of ML, NLP, and then the AI related tools in law particularly and in judicial system. So when this happens, AI is getting increasingly entangled in the pre-adjudicative phases in the law. And so there are a couple of concerns about displacement of human judgment by AI. And when we say displacement, we are not talking straight away now as the human judgment being taken over by AI and AI replacing the human judges. We are not talking of that. We are saying that AI is trying to displace human judgment instead of simply taking it over. In the sense that some sort of human judgment in some areas, in some sectors of law, are either being displaced by human judgments, or there's a good potential for AI to do that. So how does this impact the rule of law, particularly the principles of equality before law, transparency and equity? Moreover, there is a one view that ML technologies are not 100% compatible with the rule of law, for the simple reason there are lots and lots of doubts and then questions about their transparency, predictability, bias and procedural fairness. So if we measure the ML technologies and the processes in which they are inscribed with the rule of law lens, then we may find that rule of law lens will be able to tell us, or does tell us, that there are critical issues in this, and then ML technologies and the process in which they are imbibed may not fully meet the standards of transparency, predictability, non-bias and then procedural fairness. When we say procedural fairness, we mean something like the procedure should be open, it should be transparent, and more important, it should be fair. It should be fair in the sense a person who challenges the procedure, who is getting affected, should have the facility or should have the option to challenge the decision and the finding and to go for an appeal. Or the procedural fairness also includes that equal opportunity should be given for a person to defend himself or herself, and more importantly, nobody can be asked by default to implicate themselves whether they are silent or not. So procedural fairness is a legal concept which is very critical when we talk of any due process in law. It is all the more important in light of the constitutional principles that are there, like equality before law. No one should be deprived of any property, or no one should be punished on any ground unless there is a court of law which has done it, and then there should be a procedure which is fair, equitable and then meets the criteria for justice. So when we look at these parameters, or when we look at these standards, to what extent the AI based decision making, to what extent the ML based decisions and the systems which are run on AI systems based on these will fulfill this criteria is a big question. So we also need to look into the social political context of the technology adoption. And when we say that we have discussed about digital divide, we also know that technology per se may appear to be neutral, but when it is embedded in social technical systems, whether it is the huge infrastructure projects, whether it is any other system, there could be disparities in power and resources, and AI and ML have the potential to makes the disparities more or to enhance the disparities rather than to reduce them. So these are some of the concerns on AI and rule of law. In the pre-adjudicative phase, typically machine language systems and AI are used to select targets for tax and regulatory investigations, in the sense that tax administration and then various regular administrative processes like commercial administration, they use AI and ML for a lot of purposes, including identifying the potential tax violators, identifying people who should be in the tax net but they are not in the tax net, and also to identify, based upon the previous year's filings, previous year records and other things, that how some people might have responded by disclosing their income in part but not in full, or how some people could have evaded the tax system by pretending that they are not entitled to be taxed, although they or should be very well with the tax system. To do that, the tax authorities need whole lot of access to lot of data, which also includes the previous tax returns, various other financial transactions, including bank transactions, investments, purchase and then dealings in the stock market and all. So when authorities do a data intensive search analysis and then find out that some people have escaped the tax net or they have not filed the returns in an adequate way, we are seeing they are using ML and AI in the pre-adjudicative phase. This is more like an investigation, preliminary investigation. But in criminal law, the determination of individual violent risk during pre-trial bail is also a part. We will see some examples of this in these sessions or subsequent sessions. So, when a person applies for a bail in a pre-trial, particularly in a criminal case, the court will look into the potential of that person to commit a violent crime, or whether the person should be given a bail given his antecedents and precedents and then given other factors. So in the adjudication phase itself, AI and ML tools have been used either to assess the person's eligibility and then a potential to be granted bail or to deny bail. And then the problem here comes human judgments. When human judges look at things versus the court-driven counterparts look at things, there's a wide variety of perception. One way you can argue, humans have inbuilt biases. Humans have a lot of biases, either explicitly stated or implicitly taken. But systems and machines are neutral. They cannot differentiate between persons on basis of gender or anything. They look at facts, they look at bare facts, they look at data, they look at some parameters, and based on the training and then the parameters on which they have imbibed, they take the decisions. So, human judgment, it could be argued that inherently biased or its potential to be non-biased is much less, much more if we compare that with the way machines would perceive and then come up with judgments or come up with orders. So when human judgment is being displaced by AI, there are really concerns about fairness, transparency and equity, and are we replacing the human sense of being fair, being transparent, being equity with an opaque machine language driven sense of the way the AI systems take decisions. So these are some of the concerns which we will repeatedly see in the course in different contexts, in different circumstances with some case laws. And then there are also normative concerns, because criticisms often overlap with the rule of law concerns, because the rule of law concerns which we saw are also normative concerns, because rule of law ultimately is also a question of normative principles and then abiding by them. So these are some of the real concerns that are being expressed time and again on use of AI when it comes to certain applications, particularly in decision making. But let us also understand one thing: rule of law, as we emphasized earlier, is not a fixed doctrine, it is an evolving doctrine, and there are multiple interpretations. In fact, even the core components of rule of law are not the same across countries, across constitutional courts. So the rule of law, if we take some of them as core principle and then some as binding principles, we cannot argue that it will remain the same. It will remain the same always, but then the way we interpret it will also change. And then rule of law has to adapt itself to the societal needs and values, and then society itself undergoes change in the sense that from kings, queens, monarchs to constitutional scheme of things, we have traversed a long distance in terms of ideas, in terms of practices, and more importantly, in terms of normative values and principles that guide us. So, the rule of idea itself will undergo change. In a technology driven society, what changes should rule of law undergo? Or should we simply say that rule of law is something like a basic structure? It cannot be diminished, it cannot be abrogated either in part or full, and it cannot be negated or it cannot be simply thrown away, or it is something that will always be the cornerstone and that will be the foundation. So that we also one can take that irrespective of technological advancements, irrespective of the changing needs of the society and its values, rule of law principles should remain the same, because if they themselves are changing, then rule of law cannot become something that is too mutable. Then it becomes something that we will never be able to identify with the core concepts of rule of law, which have evolved over a period of centuries. And then comes what sort of influence technologies will have. See, technology's impact on law is not something new. Law has been facing technologies since time immemorial. But the question here is that what sort of impact digitization technologies, particularly the technologies like AI, machine language, algorithmic decision making, will bring in. So, question here is the devices that are related to AI, internet, communication, media, digitization are also devices that are linked with data collection, data classification, data sharing, monitoring, surveillance, and more importantly, they enable diffused control and diffused surveillance. In the sense that when you see CCTVs across cities and thousands of places, you know that CCTV cameras capture images, they are live, they are there 24/7. So they also collect vast amount of data, as we saw in the data governance perspective. Questions also arise about what happens to this data, who has access, who deals with them, who stores them, who will have access to them. So when these devices that are part of the AI ecosystem, when they collect lot of data, share that, and then when everything is fed into whole lot of big data, what exactly are we talking about? We are talking about data becoming more mutable, data becoming more important parcel of the AI based ecosystem, which again is in one sense posing a great threat to rule of law according to some, but for some other people, in some other experts, rule of law is such a concept that it can adjust, it can reinvent itself in the context of technological changes without substantially compromising on its core principles and normative values. If we take a very positive perspective, we can say that look, AI brings in consistency, it is transparent and compliance in tax administration. In the sense, applying AI tools in tax administration is enhancing the efficiency, is making the system more transparent. It is also a system that cannot be biased on account of human biases, in the sense that it goes simply by data, simply by what is available, and then simply goes by record. It does come up with judgments, it does assess, but that is unbiased. That is based purely on data without even knowing whether the person is male or female, or whether that person's skin color is this or that, whether that person is of this height or that height. So those things do not matter when AI systems work. More importantly, AI systems can play a great role in decision making because they are quicker, they are not only faster and efficient, but also they take care of many mundane things which normally a person would engage. As we saw that in legal research, as we are seeing it in various other options or various other tasks, AI can take over and do many things which otherwise normally we do with tremendous effort, in wasting mundane things, lot of time and effort in doing mundane things. And more importantly, an AI-based system can be a transparent one which can engage with the public with more confidence, in the sense that the public can engage with chatbots or AI-based systems in the front end by making them more transparent. People will understand that they are not dealing with black boxes, they are dealing with systems that will tell them what exactly they need to know and will also guide them. So by making user-friendly interfaces for AI-based systems in public administration, including chatbots, virtual assistants, and other things, they can promote transparency, they can inspire more confidence than doing it other way around, in the sense that you have a customer service section where people are not simply inaccessible because they get 100 calls a day, or they're continuously being called for one purpose or another from different consumers. So these are some of the opportunities, plus points. But the thing that haunts, or that is going to haunt any discussion on impact of AI, not just on rule of law, but on various other things, is that the very black box nature of the autonomous systems, particularly AI ones. So whether you talk of dynamic nature, whether you talk of the rule of law getting adapted to technologies like AI, ultimately the question that will pop up is, what do you do about the black box nature of AI? How do you deal with that? Can we wish it away and then still claim that AI is transparent, AI is not opaque, AI is free from bias, and then AI can be one that can really inspire public confidence? Very doubtful. When machine language is being used for enforcement adjudication, the considerations are very different, in the sense that the objectives that are to be met by ML are very different in different contexts and different applications. When they improve performance with training experience and derive rules from data, it also leaves the humans to train them again and again, but more importantly, it also helps the people who are in the administrative side that systems taken care by AI are really the ones that are mimicking what humans would do. So if they are going to produce results with lesser bias, more accuracy than the traditional regression tools, they are much better. Or in other words, they should be the ones that should be recommended for any public service use. But the question is that the technological shift, as it creeps in slowly and steadily, or as it simply leapfrogs, will have a lot of problems for the rule of values, because we are not talking of AI as a technology, we are also talking of AI as a social technical system that interacts with societal concerns, that interacts with the larger society and economy. A great feature about the ML tools is that they can interact with different forms of rule of law, whether it is formal, substantive, procedural, in various ways, depending upon the implementation. For example, an ML based implementation can be based on very formal laws. It can also have very procedural approach by using algorithms and other methodologies, and it can be very substantive also. Since the data tools rely on training data to gauge various relationships, and then they can come up with a lot of things on their own. And more importantly, supervised ones, they need predefined categories. Unsupervised ones, which can learn on their own, they themselves do a lot of classification based upon the infrastructure of the data. In other words, humans need not bother about doing so many things, leave the task to AI, which will take care of many things which otherwise humans will have to do. In the sense that structuring the data, classification of the data, and then understanding the data on its own, AI tools can do much better than humans. That is why when it comes to data, AI, there is nothing like AI in data sorting, management, and also making the best use of data. On the other hand, whether ML tools, when they interact with formal rule of law, beneficial or not, depends upon the applications and implementation. According to Fuller, a rule of law in the AI context, particularly when the question of algorithm and then algorithmic decision making comes, there is a need for a published code for future disputes, because the published code will tell people, will give people an understanding as to how the dispute is to be resolved, or how the dispute is being addressed, or how AI looks at the problem and the solution. On the other hand, code is something that is written in a way which normal people can't even make sense of. But it can be made understandable by ordinary citizens or by trained lawyers. in the sense that the code can be one that can be explainable, in the sense that you put the computer language in the one side and then you explain the steps on the other side. Say if the left hand is the computer code, on the right hand side you can explain it. This is the value input being taken by the system. Then if next step is the system assesses the value and then it takes the next step. Like that it can be split into different steps one by one in normal understandable text language, and then people can make sense of that. But Fuller also says that there could be somewhere, in the sense that even if trained people could not be understand it, there could be some abstractness that should be allowed, in the sense that we need not say that even a trained person should be able to understand what the system does 100%. And computer scientists, they themselves may not be able to fully help us to understand it. So he says that is fine, in the sense that some margin for that could be given. That is Fuller's understanding. But the problem is not the persons who have designed it, not the persons who want to understand it. Problem is looking at the systems from the people who are going to be impacted, or the stakeholder who is going to be impacted. If you look at the systems from their perspective, if they are obscure by their classification, then we should be very, very clear that they need to be categorically informed about what is the potential harm they could face. And more importantly, when a system learns on its own, if there are going to be reward functions on predictive tools, these are not normally available for examination. So when the full code is not made available, or what is made available only tells us only part of the story, then the ML systems have to be objected, because you may feel that the system is fair, it is transparent, it is not opaque, and then it treats everyone fairly, and then the steps it takes are good. In the sense that they are understandable, there are nothing that needs to be questioned. But if there are some reward functions that are inbuilt but not made visible, then that system is not fully transparent. It is hiding something, showing something else. So this is something where we need to look into. And then there are any number of challenges in understanding ML system tools, for the simple reason it's a code. To give examples of ML systems in private sector, the recommender systems used by Netflix and Amazon are based on ML tools. Similarly, the Google search algorithm, which takes about the page rank, again is based on algorithm. And Facebook also sends across lots of feed for social media users. And then that again is based on machine learning algorithm training. So these are some of the things where we know that ML tools are in vogue or being put to use in a very active way on a day-to-day basis. But machine learning systems can solve a lot of problems. For example, they can identify clusters or association within a population. If I feed the data, machine learning systems can quickly identify clusters in terms of geographical clusters, or clusters in terms of income classification, or clusters in terms of any other criteria, and associations in the sense that how are they linked up. It can associate gender with some other parameter, it can associate your location with some other parameter, it can associate your income with some other parameter, and then come up with a map and associating these things. And more importantly, you throw a data to ML system and then say, what are the deviants here? Tell me of this population, how many are less than 5 field but they are adults, and tell me of this population, how many are suffering from a rare disease which we know that will occur 1 in 10,000 or 1 in a lakh. Or it could be an outlier. An outlier could be anyone. Outlier could be a super rich person. Outlier could be someone who is much below the poverty line. So those identification the ML systems can do effortlessly and easily. And more importantly, they can come up with associated tools. Associational tools they can come up. And they can also predict classification and regression, in the sense that they can do classification, they can do regressive analysis, in the sense that having an ML tool is also as good as having a statistician at your service. So when machine language tools are being put in private sector, for many purposes, they are also using the traditional statistical method of regression analysis and other ways of looking at like mean, medium, average and everything. So this is something which we need to be aware when we talk of application of ML in different day-to-day practices. And how do the states look at ML and how do they adopt it? As we saw, they are often used for investigation, targeting and substitutes for human judges in criminal system in some countries, not in all countries. But they are also extensively used in defense technologies, in diagnostic tools. Today, medicine is transformed beyond recognition by both AI and ML, and there are a lot of diagnostics tools that are based on ML, large language models, and more importantly, AI is getting integrated into the digital technologies like your data which flows from your smartwatch can be captured, can be fed, and then ML tool can read it, and then it can come up with an analysis of your health or your health parameters if all the information fed into it. So, identifying legal violations, identifying people who have been doing well or who are law-abiding citizens, and then identifying outliers, identifying the normal population, everything is possible through ML tools. We want to know ML tools, they can be used for allocating resources. For example, ML tool can easily identify based on the population data that how many, in where or in which part of the city or which part of the country most poor people live, or most women with anemic conditions live, or most people who suffer from a specific disease, where are they scattered across? Are they clustered around some cities or are they spread evenly across the country? And here also we can do one more thing. If we tell the ML system, machine learning system, I am going to give 100 crores and then I need to identify who are the most eligible beneficiaries based upon the income criteria, based upon other criteria, or based upon the criteria which we can choose. For example, I can tell the machine language system that look, I am going to allocate 100 crores for some areas which are not well developed. Now you pick from this data, from this geographical location, and then with geospatial mapping, which areas lack the infrastructure which are mostly needed, but then they don't have it. ML system can do such a job in a wonderful way without any bias, provided the data that is fed to is right, and then it can correlate that with geospatial data, and then it can really map that infrastructure here is either non-existent or weak, and then the 100 crores can be rather spent here rather than spent in an area which has got lot of infrastructure already built. So for those decision making, we can do that. This is fine, this is understandable, but when we use ML systems to predict crimes, it becomes problematic. Particularly when police use ML system for predictive policing, it becomes very controversial. What is predictive policing? Police or the criminal system or whatever you say, the police have lot of data available to them in terms of geographies, in terms of crimes, in terms of areas where crimes are more, where area crimes are less, and then which part of the day, which week of the day of the week, and then which period. So by doing a statistical analysis, police can predict or police can come to an understanding that these areas a lot of robberies take place. In this area a lot of pickpockets take place. In this area, a lot of other crimes, violent crimes take place, including domestic violence or rape or violence against women and children. So they can, based upon this data, they can predict, okay, in this area, in this month, this many murders have been have been done. In this area, there have been so many riots. They can easily predict, or they can at least try to identify where the next problem would arise in terms of law and order. So in the broader idea of law and order, predictive policing will help the police department to identify the potential for harm, the need to take preventive action, and also the need to ensure that violent eruptions, riots, unforeseen mass murders do not happen. But using ML in this has been controversial for the simple reason, machine language learning systems, the data to which it is being fed can have biases, or the data could be incomplete, or it could predict something which, whereas nothing might happen, in the sense that the prediction could be is a simple prediction where nothing else would happen. So police would have, based on that prediction, would have taken a decision to put lot of police in a particular locality anticipating some trouble, but nothing might come out. So there are issues in it, but the problem here is that this location analysis often happens, and then they match that with the people whom they call within quotes as in living in crime infested areas. So predictive policing across the world has been a very problematic application, for the simple reason those who get affected are the ones who are already marginalized or who are already considered as deviant population. Similarly, we discussed about pre-trial violence and bail. Coming to that, Compas is a very interesting case where we will see later in much greater detail. It is based on algorithm usage. It is given to a judge to decide as to whether a person can be given a bail or not. So it takes a whole lot of data: the person's previous criminal record, the person's age, the person's income, what has been his past record in terms of other things like has he been charged for felony, has he been under trial for some other cases, how many cases he is facing, and what is his overall record in terms of other parameters: income level, employment level, whether is he involved in any family violence cases, like that. Then there is a ranking, then there is a score which from 10 to 1. So based upon the score, the judge can decide as to whether first a bail should be given or not. 2, if the bail has to be given, what conditions should be imposed. And 3, if the judge decides that bail will not be given because the score is something that does not favor grant of bail, the judge can simply say that as per the analysis, as per the data fed, and as per the Compas algorithm which is being used for it, you are not entitled for bail. So judges taking bail orders based upon this rationale enhances the efficiency, but it does not deliver full justice, and it does not do justice to people who really need it. So the Compas algorithm has been a very problematic one, which we will see. See, one fundamental problem in the Compas algorithm repeatedly came out was, it was based on racial bias. Then, given the problems or given the accusations with the American criminal system, higher proportion of factually innocent black defendants were detained, or those who were detained are not criminals, or not the potential criminals, but they were innocent, but on account of bias and other things they were detained. And the algorithm which was used to train Compas, unfortunately, it compared the factually innocent white defendants with the black ones, and then it was wrong. So the algorithm came up with the wrong decision or the wrong finding, for the simple reason it compared two things which should not be compared at all, in the sense that you cannot compare factually innocent white defendants and then factually innocent black defendants just like that, and then say that by default or by this logic, more it is the potential for a black to commit crime is more. So those sort of things were the problems with algorithm. The next case is the Midas case. This again is a case from US, introduced by the Michigan governor in 2013. Here the problem was, in USA under Social Security, people can get unemployment benefits for a particular period, and then that again the government gives them so that they can at least survive. But when this is not done manually but done through a system called the Midas, there were huge problems with that. First of all, the denial rate was very high. It was more than 90%. Then it falsely accused that the people who were given this dole or who were given this unemployment benefit were fraud, or it accused them some 40,000 of fraud. And then the system was built in such a way that if it is denied to you, there was no appeal procedure, there was no way you could challenge it and then say that this is wrong, I am entitled for because I am unemployed and I should be able to get the benefit for the simple fact that I am unemployed. And the problem with that came in so many ways that there were inadequate staffing, and then the bindings were predictions in the sense that humans couldn't override it, or it was Midas was a system which was like a straight jacket. And then when people are put or when people are assessed through such a system, even if they are innocents, even if they are entitled by some strange logic which the system decides that they will not be entitled, they would not be given the benefit. So Midas system also became very controversial. But what exactly happens when states go for it? States go for machine language systems, AI systems, or for many reasons including efficiency, enhancing a quicker public service, and more importantly, such systems often help the state to do lot of things without relying on a huge battalion or huge army of civil servants and people to be employed. So the dynamic context is that countries often compete themselves in terms of technological innovations. And then now there's a global AI race which is happening with China, USA and EU competing with each other. So when dynamic context of ML adoption, we need to take that also into account. And then many occasions, governments decide to go for AI based systems based upon strategic decision, particularly in applications like defense, and particularly in applications like high sensitive sectors. So the interplay between geopolitical and domestic factors also plays a major factor in AI adoption as well as use of ML systems. So problem here is that there is a huge potential for ML system being adopted in the future in areas where the adoptions can really replace human judgment either partially or fully. So we have discussed a couple of things in this session as an introduction to the topic which we are going to see in 3 sessions. In the next one, we will take this forward by discussing more on the intricate aspects of rule of law and AI, particularly why the rule of law and AI topic has become very hot and then very relevant now. And then there are some theoretical perspective on this topic. With that also we will look into. If we can recollect what we discussed earlier in the rule of law and then what we have discussed in the first session, one thing should be obvious, that rule of law is being time and again emphasized for the simple reason that it is the cornerstone or it is the foundation for any democratic society. It is the foundation for any society based on constitutional values. It's a foundation for any society where the equality principle reigns, and more importantly, any society where nobody, he or she, can assert himself or herself as above law and then say that everything else depends upon my whims and fancies. Thank you.